Welcome back to the Bryan Devore Connection. I'm your host, Bryan Devore. Dementia is not what you think. You heard me right. Dementia is not what you think. What is it? What is dementia then? And what does it mean for you and your loved ones and so forth? Well, here to talk to us today about all that is one of the foremost experts on the subject is Laura Wayman, the Dementia Whisperer. Laura, thank you for coming today.
Oh, good morning, Bryan, and thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I've been wanting to have you come, and we worked it out this week so you could do a variety of different things. But I wanted you here to provide some education and some information and to maybe dispel some myths about dementia and so forth. So do your thing.
Okay, so thank you for allowing me to come and raise dementia awareness, because that's my mission. And why do I need to raise dementia awareness? Well, Bryan, it is shocking because when we reach the age of 65 or older, we have a 50% chance of having some cause of dementia symptoms. And this journey is so challenging for that family caregiver. So let me share an example of how challenging, what an ultimate toll many of these caregivers pay when they're on this dementia care journey with a loved one. So I want to tell you the story of Peggy and her husband Jack. And they had a fairy tale romance, and they married very young. Early on in the first few years of their marriage, Jack and Peggy had 5 babies right away.
Wow.
Right away. And fortunately, Peggy was such a caregiver at heart. She loved babies and children and caring for them. Bryan, she loved it so much, she not only helped to raise her own 5 healthy babies, as she was raising them, she invited foster children into her home. And before it was all said and done, she also helped to raise over 20 foster children. And every one of those foster children had special care needs. Wow. And Peggy, like I said, she was just this caregiver at heart. She could always figure out how to give them appropriate care and meet their needs. Now, Jack and Peggy, throughout their whole married life, had planned on this amazing retirement dream lifestyle, just like many couples do throughout their life. And they continued to make sure that those children received everything they need to raise them to healthy adults. And as those children became adults and began to leave the home, Jack and Peggy began to think about really this retirement dream lifestyle that they had talked about, dreamed about. And when that last adult child was successfully raised and launched into their life, Jack and Peggy sold their house, bought an RV, and began to travel all over the United States. And they were so excited because, they stopped to raise all of those children. And so by now they were older, retired. And unfortunately, right after they started this lifestyle that they had dreamed about, the rug was kind of pulled out from under them because Jack's health began to fail. He had macular degeneration, so he could no longer drive, and so all the driving fell on Peggy. But you know what, Bryan? That wasn't her biggest concern, because he also began to show signs and symptoms of dementia. Darn it. It just they had to start making some decisions that they didn't really want to have to make that soon in this lifestyle. Peggy gathered Jack up as he continued to have these challenges. And, it was hard for her because they received this devastating diagnosis from their physician that he indeed had Alzheimer's as the cause of his dementia. That was so devastating because Peggy knew there was no cure. He was going to get worse over time. And that probably that lifestyle that they had dreamed about was not going to be able to provide her, that caregiver at heart, a way to give him competent and sensitive dementia care. So they sold their beloved house on wheels, and they bought a little cottage in a small little town next to some friends of theirs who also were retired, and Peggy stepped back into that role of being a caregiver. And at first she was doing okay, but Jack's symptoms continued to rear their head, And it was becoming more and more difficult for Peggy to care for him on her own. It was challenging. And she looked around, Bryan, and oops, they made a mistake because they isolated themselves away from family that could have possibly given her some help. And there was no professionals around. And even the medical community didn't have anything to give her. If she got Jack to the doctor, which was over an hour away, and he resisted, the doctor would come in for 5 or 10 minutes, listen to his heart, take his blood pressure, say, well, he's got dementia, and send him home. There was nothing that the medical community could give her to help her either. So she looked around, decided, well, maybe I'll get some support from my family via emotional support and the telephone. So she began to have phone conversations with her family, which was helpful. But you know what, Bryan? The family was kind of surprised. What? You're having challenges? All their life they had seen her take care of everything. With all of these foster children and their challenges, she just always had a solution, could always figure it out. And they had no idea what dementia care was like. They were living the life of young adults with education and careers and families of their own. So they were surprised. But then Peggy began to explain what it was like to care for a loved one with these kinds of symptoms that were challenging. For example, now Jack was wandering. So he, if she took her eyes off of him for a minute, he was out the door and down the road. She even had to call the police a couple times to have them fetch him and bring him back home. And he was not sleeping at night. He was up and down. So she literally was having to sleep with one eye open because he needed constant supervision and she was exhausted. And his brain had become so challenged with this brain function loss that sometimes she would enter the room and he could no longer process who she was or their relationship any longer. That information was completely gone, and he would become extremely anxious when she would enter the room thinking she was a stranger in their own home. As she was sharing this with the family, they said, oh my goodness, you need to get help in there. She said, well, there isn't professional help here. There's no assisted living, in-home care, those kinds of resources that we have now. And so her family would say, well, we'll move back and help you. She'd always resist. No, I'm not ready to interfere with your lives. Jack and I both said that we would take care of each other. If it gets too much, I'll alert you. And then these conversations were happening more and more, and then one night, Jack and Peggy were home alone. And Peggy had made Jack a wonderful dinner, as she always did, but Bryan, as she sat down to have dinner with Jack, Peggy suffered a massive heart attack. Now, Jack's dementia was so far advanced, he did not recognize that she needed help. In his confusion, he wandered outside and said something interesting and concerning to a passing neighbor that Peggy was tired. She was sleeping on the floor. So by the time help arrived, it was too late. Peggy was gone. Bryan, Peggy was my mother. That's how I learned that we are not providing that caregiver with the education, the support, and this was 20 years ago. So throughout this time frame, my mission is to help us to better understand what is happening to that person. I've observed how the way that we communicate with an adult who has a healthy brain, what we've learned throughout our lifetime works for the healthy brain, but it does not work for that person who has this kind of brain function loss and is exhibiting dementia symptoms. And that caregiver needs to understand this, become dementia aware so that they can understand guilt-free that they cannot do it alone, that they need to ask for help, that they need to access professional help that's been trained in dementia awareness to come alongside them. Had I known this, I could have supported my mom in the right way, and I could have saved her life. And my mission is to save those caregivers' lives. 68% of the time, that caregiver, especially a same-age spouse, will get sick and go first.
Wow, that's a huge number.
It is.
So there's a lot to get in there. First, one of the things that I was so amazed about when we first talked was just, changing the paradigm of what dementia is. Because people say, well, my mom has dementia, or like you talk about, well, my dad has dementia and it's leading to Alzheimer's. And that's not the way it is. These causes bring about symptoms of dementia.
Right, exactly. So that's actually upside down, because you're not going to have a symptom unless something causes you to have a symptom, because symptoms are your body's way of saying something's wrong. We need to pay attention. And when someone develops or presents dementia symptoms, that means that they have one of these causes. Now, what I mean by causes is a brain illness, a brain disease, or a brain event such as a stroke that is causing that person to lose normal learned brain function, that brain function they've learned over their lifetime. And so it is that brain saying, hey, something's going on, and they present in these dementia symptoms. And often what we've learned is that it's about memory loss. Now, memory loss is not the symptom that we need to worry about, because it's not even memory loss. It's the loss of ability to process the memories. That's the actual symptom. It's the loss of ability to process what we see, what we hear, how to move safely, how to have good judgment, how to concentrate, how to basically think. It's that processor, that thinker, that hub in our brain that gathers all this information that we get hit with every millisecond, and how to use that information, what it means to us, how to react to that information and accept that information and process it and have meaning. That's what we lose. And there's so many more than just that memory loss, but you can't have a symptom unless you have a cause, and there's over 100 causes.
Yeah.
Diseases, illnesses, stroke, medication, brain injury.
Yeah, and a lot of what you do with your trainings, I know, and I had the opportunity to sit in a couple trainings, is talking about what those different causes may be, how they affect the brain, which is great. The thing that resonated with me, I think, the most, which kind of leads to empowering people to be good caregivers, whether they're professional or family members, is to really think about it in the sense of feeling, and how people are feeling. Because as you said, they may not, they no longer have the ability to, access the memories, but they have the same feelings from those things. And so reframing how you work with, with your loved one, keeping that in mind.
Exactly. Keeping in mind that the feelings and emotions that they're born with remain as we learn through our life as humans. In order for us to learn the best, it has to be attached to meaning and feeling. So the stronger the feeling, the better we learn. And we attach those in our storage in our brain. But when we begin to lose that, if we have one of these devastating causes, such as Alzheimer's, which is the leading cause, by the way, that's why we talk about it so much. But if we have that disease of Alzheimer's in our brain, when it robs us of that learned brain function, of the ability to process, the feelings remain. So they're actually accessing those memories that are there, but they're misunderstanding time and place and details. Context. But what happens is when that they access that memory, the feelings are the strongest. So think about if you access the memory of your childhood home, what feelings are attached to that, Bryan?
Yeah, they're warm and welcoming,
yes,
loving.
Yes, exactly. So what happens with these adults who have lived this lifetime with all these feelings and emotions that are attached, they access that childhood home. They're confused about when that was happening. They want those feelings now. So it's not the place they want to go to. They don't want to go home to the building, the home the actual structure. They want to go to and access those feelings because the cause of dementia is causing them not to be able to access those feelings because of the anxiety and confusion. So they want those back. So they're trying to access those feelings. So the hopeful and helpful part of becoming dementia aware is we can help them to have more of those meaningful moments, to share those feelings, to feel that by bringing them there with our care approach.
So you've written an amazing book, and unfortunately I don't have it with me or I'd show it, but you have the book available. I don't want to give away a lot because I want people to go to your website, order the book, and learn about these things. But one little tease is how we reframe, and again, this is empowering caregivers, reframe our approach. Don't be asking a bunch of questions, right? You want to make them feel that certain way, and that's not the way to do it.
And because their thinker is broken, that's basically how I like to explain it. When we give them information that they can't respond to because they can't understand it, they can't think about it, they can't find meaning, like asking a question. When I ask you a question, you with your healthy brain, Bryan, I'm just glad you have a healthy brain.
Yes.
We all are. Okay, so if I ask you a question, your healthy brain has to think of the question and then think of an answer. What happens with an individual who's experiencing dementia symptoms is they're challenged with even understanding what you're saying. So it sounds to them almost like this, blah, blah, blah. And then we're expecting them to respond to that, but they can't find meaning and they can't respond in the right way because their thinker shuts down. So it makes them feel anxious. So if I were to ask you, are you hungry? And you have this, unfortunately, going on in your brain, that gap in processing, you would hear blah, blah, blah. And how would that make you feel?
Anxious.
Yeah. Because you'd want to answer, and you wouldn't understand why you can't understand it. So you would pull away. No. Do you want to go listen to the music, Bryan? What I would see if you were my client or resident who had this challenge, you would say, no. And they respond with, they kind of want you to go away. Whereas what we need to do is think for them. And it is a complete change in the way that we're communicating with you because I want you to feel loved, safe, secure, and valued. I don't want you to think. I don't want, because it's going to make you anxious. So instead, I would do what I call positive action. And it's action and words. It's our intention. Bryan, come with me. There's great music. I love it when and I am guiding you. I'm guiding you and I don't want you to think because I want you to feel safe. I want you to feel guided. I want you to feel supported. I want you to know I'm encouraging you to access what you still can do without you having to think about it.
So again, it's a complete reframe, I think, of what we call dementia, what we consider dementia, and then how we deal with the issues. Whether you're a professional caregiver or a family caregiver, and we don't want people to be in that 68%.
Right.
Because it becomes emotionally challenging for them, and they're bringing the baggage of if they're a child, their baggage of their childhood to the table and the whole 9 yards.
And the professional caregiver, burnout is extreme, 200%. And we as professionals have not helped them. We've thrown them out onto a dementia care floor with 15, 20 residents, with only equipped with the way they learned to communicate with a healthy brain, which unfortunately works with a healthy brain,
right,
and has worked. So now we've thrown them out with that, and it causes this barrier for them to be able to truly engage, and then that anxiety escalates, and that caregiver feels completely helpless because they don't understand involuntarily they're causing that to happen just by communicating the way they've been taught to communicate.
Yeah.
So it's so important because then when we can get the family dementia aware and they're using this And then when they need to turn to those professionals, they don't have that stumbling block, because there's that transition that happens, because then that professional caregiver can pick up and help and come alongside and partner with them, and that person is surrounded with a safety net of dementia awareness.
Yeah. So that was, again, just an overview. There's a lot to go into it that Laura can do. If you are an individual who's dealing with this with their loved ones, you want to get her book, and you can set up appointments with her. Her information's on screen, her website, her phone number. For professionals, if you want to have her come into your community and do some trainings, or go to if you have a home care company and you want to train your nurses and staff, you can do that too. So a lot of great information. Buy her book, check her out. Laura, thank you so much for coming and kind of turning dementia on its head a little bit and helping empower people to be good caregivers.
Thank you, Bryan. I'm so honored, like I said, to be with you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.